Hi, everybody. Today is Friday, September 13th. And before we get started with our lesson today, I want to take you into an email that I got from Mr. Mahoney. I know you guys, some of you may have had issues with your good notes. And if you have, you understand how frustrating that is. The plan was originally that we were going to have the IT people at school wipe your good notes off your iPad over the weekend, and then they were going to reinstall it over the weekend so that when you came to school on Monday, all would be well. But today we're going to have you guys in advisory uh, do this yourself. And so if you're gone today, that means you need to do this right now. So, number one thing that I need you to do is open up first of all, look at right here. Make sure that your data, whatever, make sure your information is backed up to iCloud. We should have gone through everybody's computer earlier this week. Mrs. Stork was making sure everybody had this done during guided study or during advisory. I can't remember what it was. But you go into you just make sure that you are backed up to the iCloud. If you don't know if you've done this, then don't do anything else. Okay? If you do know that you've done this and you're ready to go, here's what Mr. Mahoney says you need to do. So you are open just to your home screen. Don't go into GoodNotes. You are going to long press the GoodNotes app. This is where you hold the GoodNotes app and you keep your finger on it and it makes it shake and it gives you that like negative sign. You are going to delete it. So remove it. Hit that negative sign. Okay? Then go to Mosel and go into your self-help and click reinstall GoodNotes. And he says this can take anywhere from 1 minute to 15 minutes. So note to self. And then once you've installed it and it comes up and it's ready to go, then go ahead and open GoodNotes and turn iCloud back on. Okay? Because I think it toggles it off when it installs the app and you have to physically turn it on. Okay, so do that right now. And then once you have your good notes up and you're ready to go, then come back because you're going to need to download some things into your notebook. So go ahead and pause the video and then come back when you're ready to go. Okay, I'm assuming that you're here and that means you're ready to go. Today the kids needed their notebook. I am giving them paper copies of something. You will have a digital copy. So you will need to use your highlighter tool and your pen or pencil tool in GoodNotes. We're starting a new chapter. We're in lesson 2.1 and it's called Investigating Landforms on Venus. So go ahead and open up your notebook. You should be at a new page and go ahead and write in this title, GOM 2.2, Investigating Landforms on Venus. Pause the video, get this taken care of, and then come on back when you're ready to go. All right, this is something that's new. We haven't done a warm up from Amplify yet. And so I want to just kind of introduce the idea of a warm up. Plus, this one was kind of a good one, and I want you to give it a shot. So we have this picture, and here's the prompt. It says, Claire made the diagram below to show how a puddle she saw in the morning can disappear by the end of the day. Now I'm going to tell you that Claire's diagram is incomplete. Take a minute to really study that diagram and think about what's missing. And what would you add to the diagram to better show Claire's idea? So if you look at the picture, you can see, I guess it's really important that you really are reading the captions, that you're not just looking at the pictures and ignoring the words. So we can see that what Claire is trying to say is that liquid water will go into the air through evaporation. It goes from a liquid to a gas during a change of phase called evaporation. If you look really carefully, though, you can see that there are parts of the graphic that are labeled or identified. So starting at the bottom, we've got the ground. Whoops. You've got the ground, and in parentheses, it says geosphere. Because the geosphere is the solid outer layer of a rocky planet or of a planet. It's the crust. And so that would be the ground. The puddle, because it's liquid water, it's part of the hydrosphere. So the part of the diagram that's missing is some kind of a label about the atmosphere, that the liquid water is turning to water vapor, and that goes into the atmosphere. So that's the thing that you need to add, or that you would change. All right, activity number 2, introducing active reading. I don't know if you guys have done active reading in the past, either at Springfield or Westmont. The way that I ask you to go through active reading may be different. We spend a lot of time talking about active reading, and so let's just get started. I want to remind you what we talked about yesterday. First of all, remember, your mission is to find out what geologic process formed on the channel on Mars. Was it flowing water that formed it, or was it flowing lava? And why is it important? Who cares? Why do we care if that channel was made by flowing water or flowing lava? So remember, if it was flowing water, then that means that Mars has the two things that are necessary, or had in the past, two things that were necessary to support life. And that's what we are looking for. So remembering what we did yesterday, we had a chapter 1 question: what formed the channel on Mars? And we compared the surface of Mars to the surface of Earth. And were we able to answer the question from chapter 1? And the answer is no, we weren't. Because you can use the same words to describe landforms on the surface of both Mars and Earth, we need more evidence. So this is our chapter 2 question. How can we gather more evidence about whether lava or water formed the channel on Mars? So go ahead and let's add chapter 2 question to your notes. Go ahead and pause that and copy it and come on back. Okay, so I handed out hard copies of this article. It's just a front side and a back side. There's just 2 pages. You have this in today's folder in GoodNotes. Or today's folder in Schoology. Make sure that you go in and that you copy the PDF to your Geology on Mars notebook. So you'll have like this page, and then go ahead and add the article directly after this page. Okay? We're going to read an article about Venus, and we're going to read it. Venus is another rocky planet. There's this scientist. He's a geologist, and he observed some really interesting landforms on Venus, and he wanted to kind of figure out what's going on. He needed to get more evidence. And so that's kind of what this article is about. Notice that I've highlighted rocky planet and evidence. I'm just trying to remind you guys about your vocabulary terms. And so we've got this article. It's called Investigating Landforms on Venus. Earth scientists read a lot, and not just earth scientists. All scientists read a lot. They read about investigations that other scientists have done, and they read to learn more about Earth and space science. They read carefully and critically, making sure that they understand the ideas. This topic, or this idea, this activity called active reading, is a way of reading science text that's similar to how scientists read. I don't know if you have ever had a class where you were reading a text and you get done reading and you're like, wait a second, I do not remember what I just read. That's happened to me a lot, like even recently. Um, you know that I'm taking grad classes, and I've shown you guys my books that I have to read. Sometimes I've got so much on my mind, or it's not super interesting exactly what I'm reading, and I tend to space out a little bit. I'm sure you guys do the same thing. So active reading is a way for us to really focus our mind and be present while we're reading, because it's talking about adding notes, highlighting, and like being present as you read. So this is an example of an article that a student annotated while reading. And if you look at it real quickly, first of all, what jumps out, three different things. Number one, the student used highlighters, right? Two different highlighters. And if you look at the pink, you can tell that, first of all, they highlighted vocabulary words. So there's microbiome, microorganism. We've got digestive system over in the first caption, and then gut in the second one. So clearly they're using pink to highlight vocabulary. And then they used yellow to highlight just different things that are important, or like, you know how I have you underline keywords just so that you're like, what is the most important word here? That's what this person was doing. And then the third thing that you'll notice is this student wrote additional notes in the margin, lots of questions. Do you see the second, in the second paragraph at the very top in the left, it says the cross-cutting concepts of systems, and then took a different color and put a box around the word systems. Do you see the arrows that they used? Take a look in the third paragraph. This person, as they were reading, they had a question. Okay. So it says, how long have scientists studied microbiomes? And it looks like the answer to that, the question came from that it's still in its early stages. Later on in that paragraph, it says what happens during each interaction. And he circled that, drew an arrow. This seems really important. What does it mean? Interaction, what does it mean? And then here's the deal. Underneath that second picture, the student identified the interaction, the word interaction again. And so they have arrows pointing back up like, hey man, look at this, is really important. I've read about this twice now. What's going on? Notice that it's not anything formal. It's not complete sentences. It's like immediate stream of conscious writing down, making notes as you read. It's not something that you read and then you go back and add notes. It's like immediately. Now, this is a skill. It's something that you have to practice. And so that's what we're going to do today. And every single unit, we have at least one article, if not more. And this is what I mean. This text right here would be a great example of an annotation. Annotation means writing down, right? Taking notes. So you can't just highlight, you have to actually write down notes. And throughout the unit, we're going to read printed articles. Go ahead and get your article ready, and you may want to do a split screen so you can watch what I'm doing, and then I want you to do it as well, okay? So you'll need some, like your writing tool and then a highlighter. We talked in class about using, how many highlighters do you need? Definitely choose green to highlight vocabulary, okay? We don't have a vocab list for this, but we do have a vocabulary list for your whole unit. And you're going to see some of those same terms in this article. And then choose another color. It doesn't even matter, but a different color other than your vocabulary color, so that you can just highlight some important words. Remember, look at this example. We're highlighting important words or phrases. We are not highlighting the entire text. We're not highlighting a whole paragraph. If you highlight everything, nothing stands out as being important. So be very, very sparse with your highlighter. Be really particular with what you're using your highlighter for. Make sure that it's really, really important things that feel like you have to highlight it so your eye goes to it when you go back to look at the article again. We're going to use these articles again on Monday. And so when you go back to look at it on Monday, I want your eye to go to the important things and not have to fight through an entire page worth of highlighting, because then nothing's important. Okay. So, couple tips. Active reading is when you make notes next to the text to show your thinking as you read. Here's some ideas on how you can mark your text. First of all, you want to highlight your vocab terms. You do not have to highlight every single time they write the word rocky planet. Remember, highlighting vocabulary terms is just to kind of help you see how that vocabulary term is used in a sentence. It really helps you to remember the definition. So you don't just like once or twice and then that's it. Otherwise, it's just too much. As you're reading, write questions that pop into your head right away. Find some white space, either in the margins or in between paragraphs or whatever. Use arrows, use lines, use whatever you need to kind of direct your eye to where you want to remind yourself to look when you go back to it on Monday. After you write those questions, sometimes if you ask a question early on in the article, you keep reading and then you might say, oh my gosh, there's the answer to that question. So you could highlight that, just the answer, and then draw an arrow back up to where you had the question. That's a really good way to make those connections. The next bullet down is making connections to previous knowledge. So if you read anything about what we've learned about comparing Mars and Earth, including key concepts, that's a great place to put it. And then lastly, if you're reading a description, you may want to draw a picture to help you understand the text. If there's a lot of comparing, sometimes I'll draw in the margin, I'll draw like a little T-chart and I'll just write down, like I'll pull out what they're comparing and I'll put one on one side and one on the other side. Just little things like that can help you really pull out the important information. All right, so pay attention to the graphics also. In this article, we've got 3 graphics on the front and I think 2 on the back. I can't remember. But they're pictures or they're diagrams. And the reason why they're included in an article is because they're there to help clarify what you read. They're there to clarify the text. Typically, you'll read a paragraph and then maybe there's an article or a graphic that goes with that paragraph. You definitely need to make sure that you read the captions. Don't just look at the pictures, because then you'll kind of live with being lost. Like, what is that picture at the very top of this page? It's weird. You read the caption and then you're like, oh, okay, I get it. And maybe you can annotate or make notes based on these as well. If you go back to that example, see like that, they highlighted vocabulary terms. Or in the bottom one, we've got this idea of interaction. And hey, this is important. It looks really important. What does that mean? Okay. At the very end of it, do you see how this person wrote big idea and then has like a statement? I want you to try and think about that too. After you read the whole article, what's the takeaway from the article? Remember, always ask yourself, why did Mrs. Clayton have us read this article? What's the big idea? Why did we read this? Okay. So I'm going to model the first part of active reading. I'm going to read the title and I'm going to read the first paragraph of the article out loud. And then I'm going to I just let the kids go on and do their thing. Okay. So the very first thing you see is this investigating landforms on Venus. Now, unfortunately, I don't have a writing tool. I'm using my computer, not my iPad. And so I'm just going to have to describe this to you. When you see an article and you've got the article first, the very first thing you need to do is read the title and maybe make a comment on that, or like predict, what do you think this is about? So we talked in class about, it says investigating landforms on Venus. And so immediately we're like, okay, landforms, we know what that is. And so somebody in one of the classes says, okay, are there channels on Venus? Great question. So we're going to write, are there channels on Venus? Just kind of small in there, right next to the word landforms. And then somebody else was like, why are we reading an article about Venus if we're trying to figure out what happened to the channel or what caused the channel on Mars? Great question. So you're going to write next to the word Venus, why are we reading about this? Okay. Let me go ahead and read the first paragraph. Imagine traveling in a spaceship towards the surface of the planet Venus. At first, everything is hidden by thick clouds, but as you get closer, you can see the rocky surface below. So we can highlight rocky in green. It's not the definition, but then off to the side in the margin, I just drew like a line under the word rocky, and then I asked the question, Venus is a rocky planet. I'm making a connection to what I already know. Let's continue. It says, as you fly over the surface, you notice strange landforms, green, scattered around. Do you see how I'm not even finishing the sentence? I'm doing it right as I'm reading. They are raised domes with cracks reaching outward in all direction. And so immediately I'm like, oh, raised domes. So we circled raised domes, drew an arrow up into the title where it said landforms. That's the landform we're talking about. So the question that I had up there before, are there channels on Venus? That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the raised domes with cracks reaching outward in all directions. So I am questioning what this thing looks like. Raised domes. So I drew a sideways view down, like underneath the word directions, kind of is some really good space there. I drew like a cross section or a side view of a hill. And then it says with cracks reaching outward in all direction. And so I just kind of drew what I think it looks like. And then it says, these are called novae. Okay, novae seems to be like, that's the name of the raised dome. So I circled novae and I drew a line from the circle of novae to the circle raised domes. The raised domes are called novae. Now, that's annotation. Let's go ahead and look underneath the caption of the first picture. This photo, taken by a spacecraft called Venera, shows the rocky surface of Venus. The triangles in the photo are part of the spaceship. So what we did is, if you can look almost dead center, there's these two kind of bigger rocks, almost dead center. We circled those rocks. And then in the fourth line of that paragraph, it says, you can see the rocky surface below. So I circled those rocks and I connected it to, we highlighted that word rocky in green. I just drew a line from the rocks to the green. Like, there's your proof. Okay? I'm making these connections as I'm reading them. And I'm just kind of tracking my reading, my thinking on this paper. There's no, how do I say this? There's no right or wrong way to do it, except do not just highlight. That's not annotating. You have to make notations. Anytime you read something, if you're like, what the heck is that? Ask that. Just put a question mark next to it. If you read something and as you're reading it, you're like, oh, that makes sense. Say that on your paper. It's like whatever you're thinking, put it on paper. Things that seem important, highlight just little bits, the most important things. Okay? So now I want you to go ahead and finish reading. I read it out loud. I did not model any more annotations. I just read the whole article out loud. You go ahead and read it, you annotate it, and then you're going to hang on to it and bring it to me on Monday. We spent some time discussing. I had the kids turn to their table partner and talk about what they highlighted or what they notated in each paragraph. And if somebody was like, oh, yeah, that's a good thing, then they got to kind of copy or revise so they could add a little bit more notes. Again, not everybody's going to have the same thing. And if your table partner said, hey, I'm going to do this, well, this is what I did. I underlined this. Because I had a question about it, you may not have had a question about it. And so you don't need to do that. But good idea for us to talk to each other. It's always important to talk with another person as you intake new information, because you may have misunderstood something and somebody can help clarify what you're saying. You always go back to the text. Did I read this correctly? All right. So we're not talking about that. Any interesting or unanswered questions we talked about then as a whole group. And that was it. So just make sure that you study your not the chapter 1 vocabulary and key concepts. You need to just go into your flashcards in GoodNotes and just continue to go through those, write out the definitions. All right, you guys, take care.